Former flight attendant Dora still remembers her first flight. Her hands and legs were shaking with nervousness. You're performing in front of people, and it's like stepping onto a stage, a rehearsed speech, a well-trained voice, precise movements during the safety demonstration. On my first flight, I was so nervous that my voice became hoarse. I even spilled a drink on a passenger. Luckily, it was a cold beverage, not hot tea, Dora recalls. Before making her debut at altitude, Dora, like all flight attendants, underwent special training. The new recruits were taught aviation safety, the intricacies of using emergency equipment, providing first aid, and offering service, after which they took tests. We were also taught how to care for our skin, the importance of healthy eating and physical exercise. They even taught us the basics of makeup and how to create neat hairstyles. Manicures were mandatory, but nails couldn't be longer than 3 millimeters. Shoes had to be with a 7-centimeter heel, switching to 5 centimeters in the cabin. This is important for maintaining stability in emergency situations. By the way, we also recommend that passengers avoid wearing high heels on flights and dress in light, loose-fitting clothing, says the former flight attendant. Before each flight, special airline staff check the appearance of the flight attendants, their knowledge of safety procedures, and their readiness for the flight. If necessary, they conduct alcohol tests. If you're on standby, you must be ready to fly at any time of day to replace sick or otherwise unfit colleagues. The ability to calm down aggressive passengers has saved Dora more than once. When a foreign passenger complained that something was dripping on him from above, I ran my hand over the liquid and realized it was apple juice, which had leaked from a box in his suitcase. Incidentally, the passenger, who wanted to vent his aggression, did so on the return flight by posting a video on social media. He got his 5 minutes of fame, but it was fame with a bad odor. Flight attendants are also trained in how to deal with drunk passengers. Depending on the level of intoxication, there are 3 traffic light signals: red, yellow, and green. We have to act accordingly. If it's a red signal, the passenger is not allowed to board, says Dora. In general, there are 4 levels of threat on board: Level 1, verbal threats Level 2, physical threats Level 3, use of a weapon Level 4, attempted breach of the cockpit. There are also instances of harassment, in which flight attendants have the right to call the police. Some passengers try to grab us by the buttocks when we bend over to serve them. Once, there was a fight on board, and we had to make an emergency landing in Ottawa. Passengers started throwing rice and other onboard food. I was standing with the cart, trying to collect the food, and suddenly someone touched my butt. I turned around. Everyone was sitting there with innocent faces. Dora recalls. The most terrifying thing that can happen during a flight is a fire on board. A plane can burn down in minutes, and we must evacuate passengers within 90 seconds. The aircraft is filled with flammable materials, fuel in the engines, technical fluids, oxygen reserves, and the upholstery of the cabin and seats. This is precisely why smoking is prohibited. But we constantly catch violators of this ban. If a passenger throws a cigarette butt into a trash can, it could start a fire. Yes, there is a built-in fire extinguisher in the lavatory that can detect and extinguish a starting flame, but the risks are very high. Our heroine has had to endure emergency situations several times. Once, birds flew into the airplane's engine. During takeoff, we had already gained significant speed, and then a flock of birds collided with our plane. There was a loud crash, and the birds damaged all the engine blades, causing us to come to a sudden stop. A young mother in business class nearly lost her infant, who, despite our repeated warnings, was not secured with a seatbelt. The child could have easily been thrown from her arms and fatally injured. Passengers began jumping out of their seats, screaming, even though we had quickly assessed the situation and asked everyone to remain seated. The plane was changed, and some people refused to continue the flight, recalls the flight attendant. Over the years of working in the skies, our heroine has repeatedly had to prevent dangerous situations, but the number of reckless passengers, unfortunately, does not decrease. Unfastened seatbelts, attempts to smoke in the bathroom, and even trying to have sex. Once, a couple wanted to sneak into the bathroom right in front of our eyes. We stopped them, saying that the bathroom was too small and they should go in one at a time. They were still restless afterward, Dora shares. Passengers also try to have sex in the cabin, usually at night. They think everyone is asleep, and we, the flight attendants, supposedly see nothing. But we see everything. The view from above is excellent. So stop trying to hide under a blanket and enjoy yourself with your partner. You're in a public place. Some passengers demand extra attention. Others incessantly ask for alcohol, not to drink, but to take with them, and some eat for themselves and their neighbor. Some passengers even queue up with thermoses for hot water. Some believe we should act as porters, demanding we lift their suitcases. We can help, but we're not obligated to lift your luggage, Dora says. The ex-flight attendant has many amusing stories in her collection. For instance, newbies look for the restroom in the cockpit and later come to the galley asking for a toilet brush. By the way, only the senior flight attendant, like our heroine, has the right to enter the cockpit. The food for pilots is different from what is served to passengers, and they are fed at different times for safety reasons. Flight attendants also have superstitions. For example, it is believed that you shouldn't sew on a button or do any sewing before a flight. Every time I take to the skies, I pray, and upon landing, I thank heaven for a successful flight. We have a tough job, constant sleep deprivation, time zone changes, and only 12 hours of rest between flights. But no matter what, I don't regret the years spent in the sky. After flying at great heights, you start to appreciate the simple joys of life on the ground, concluded former flight attendant Dora, who hasn't entirely left aviation and now sends young colleagues into the skies.